Good evening, and on Kristy's side, good morning, and welcome to our next session of Executive Elevation Experience, where I'm having a conversation with Kristy Kade, who is the CEO of the White Ribbon Alliance. I serve on the board of the White Ribbon Alliance and met Kristy through that work, and I'm really happy to be having this conversation with Kristy. And deeply appreciative, Kristy, that I know you're not feeling too great, but that you made the time to be with us. Welcome.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
So we have 30 minutes, and I have a few questions for you. So I'm going to get right into it. The first question is, tell us a little bit about your leadership journey, how you got to where you are, and who supported you to this point of getting to, this position.
Yeah, no, happy to answer that question. So I'm pretty lucky in that since I was a young age, I had a very clear sense of direction and passion for what I wanted to do, and dedicated my career to advancing women's rights and gender justice. That said, I actually did not think of leadership or being a CEO as part of it till I was in my late 30s. In fact, I actually remember talking to a friend / boss at one time and saying how I thought I made such a great number two. I was a great number two, a great deputy. And she looked at me and she said, "What are you talking about? You're a number one. You should be number one." And I was like, no. And it made me stop and think, why not me? Why could I not explore what that means and what that looks like? And it started to kind of shift the idea of leadership in my head. And then there was a desire to want to try my hand at it. I've had a lot of really incredible bosses who I've learned a lot from. And I really need to thank other women who were my bosses, who championed me and encouraged me and held me up and gave me space to explore different ideas. I wouldn't be where I am without them. But I also saw and thought about things I would want to do differently, and how I could take what I learned from them and also lean into my own style to kind of create the culture and then the type of environment that I would want to work in for the long term. And and so when the opportunity came to be a CEO of WRA, I decided to go for it. And it's been an incredible year. And I've really learned leadership is such an evolving process. And the really successful leaders are also not afraid to be led themselves and in new and unsurprising directions by other people. And so that's sort of where my journey has gotten me. It's always wanted to work on behalf of women, didn't necessarily see in the leadership position, but other women really encouraged that and saw it in me before I saw it in myself. And I'm so grateful for that.
That resonates with me as well. I think I had a similar journey. And on that note of you being CEO now, tell us a bit about the work of the WRA and why it's so important to you.
Yeah, WRA means a great deal to me. I left a previous organization partly because their mission spoke to me so much, and even from my own personal and lived experience. At WRA, what we do in advancing gender equity and women's health and rights, we first and foremost ask women what they want and they need. and then we work with them to give it in this very bottom up way. We ask, listen, and act. And not enough people do that.
Mm-hmm.
And myself personally benefited from that in my life. I grew up in an abusive home. I grew up with insecure housing, was often homeless in many ways. And someone, when I was young, asked me what it was I particularly needed. Lots of people were trying to solve for me, but someone asked me what I needed. And I told them, and they helped me to get it and work together. And that put me on the path. It was another woman, another strong leader and mentor in my life. And that put me on the path where I'm now. And so I really feel the same desire to ask that of other women and girls. What is the question you need to be asked? What is the answer you have inside you? And how can I help with others get it for you? Yeah, including yourself. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Thanks for sharing that. And I think we've had some conversations about that on the board. And I recently saw also in the report that you shared with us, this approach. And I think it's a critically important approach in terms of the way we work, because often as feminist organizations also, we tend to fall into the trap of very top-down programming and ways in which we decide what happens next. So thanks for sharing that. And also, thanks for sharing vulnerable information. We appreciate it, and you're safe with us.
Thank you. It's not something I talk about a lot. And I don't think a lot of people know that about me. And this is something that I have begun exploring more. And how do I, again, root my work and my own personal journey to continue to show more empathy and compassion and change people's minds about life trajectories. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Thanks so much for that. How would you describe your leadership style, and how does feminism feature in that?
Yeah. I would say my leadership style is to take the work seriously, but not take myself so seriously. I have a pretty informal leadership style, and truthfully, it's something people have tried to shake out of me over the course of my career. But I really believe in being authentic and radical transparency, sharing what I'm thinking, sharing what I'm struggling with, being very collective in finding and driving solutions. And I think you can only do that when you share what you're thinking and what you're feeling, and also making space for that. I've always been someone who also focuses on tell the truth, clearly and plainly. Not everyone will necessarily like it, but they'll respect you for it. And that way you can at least be planning toward a shared and clear future. I don't believe in ambiguity and making people feel uncertain. So, I want to lead with certainty, and I also want to lead with joy and laughter. I would say another really kind of defining factor is, I believe is, the best laid plans are the most adaptable, and being willing to be flexible, try things and fail, and it's okay, and try something new. And then I think the other kind of leadership tenet I really try to listen to is, and this is the hardest one, but first, always respond with compassion. If I feel irritated, if I don't like what someone said, I try to take a breath and then think, okay, what is the compassionate way to interpret what just happened? And that's the thing I try to meditate on and do better every day. That's what I probably struggle with the most.
Yes, and believe me, I think it's a universal struggle. As a coach, I see that a lot, and in my own journey as well, this idea of not reacting immediately, stepping away from, whatever's happening. And I like what you are saying about seeing it from the lens of compassion and seeing how to respond from that. I think that's a beautiful lesson. So tell us about some of the difficulties you've had as a leader. What has been difficult for you in your leadership journey?
Yeah. I think one of the things I've most struggled with, I think a lot of women say not being liked. And that was maybe an issue for me a long time ago. But what I found is when I believe you can be kind and not be afraid of making tough decisions. And when I found I was being authentic and could really stand behind a decision I made and could, communicate that well and effective, I was able to really also stand behind the response, and whether it even if it wasn't always a happy response from the person. But I also think people appreciated that, tough decisions and accountability could be done with kindness. I think what I'm continuing to really struggle with, though, especially since I've taken on this new role, is being underestimated and also really being continually condescended to and patronized by other leaders. I will say older leaders. I'm still not quite in the club in many ways. And, I'm realizing, even though people say they want change, when you actually try to pursue it, how many people will actually, even though who you said they were on your side, champion you, will try to stop it. And they try to stop it by making you feel small, by making you feel like you don't know how the world works. And that you don't understand processes, when what they're saying is you want to challenge the status quo where I'm comfortable in. And I have to remind myself that when someone is deliberately trying to make me feel small, to not shrink, but try to stand in my power and know that I'm not only representing what I think is right, but I'm representing the women and girls who've asked me to lead with them, what they're asking for, and to keep pushing back about all the things people say you can't do, or the world's not ready for it, and actually try to be a model of the change we're calling for in the world. So many, from big to little things, like telling me, cannot offer unlimited paid time off, or we cannot direct fundraise. And, this comes from other board members, other leaders, not our new board, but past. You can't fundraise for direct local organizations, or, you can't bring in a person on that salary when they don't have this levels of experience. And again, I'm trying to change the rules, but it's hard. It's hard to do that because I feel like I'm going against a huge system, and I have great partners, but there's a lot more people out there right now who still, despite saying it, they don't really want the system to change. Or they can't imagine how it can really change. And it starts with just someone questioning it, but they feel like you're questioning them. And, that's been tough. I think one of the things that was also really hard, and, when I took this job with a former board, I was presenting some, vision, and it did not go well with some board members. And afterwards, other board members called me and they said, "I'm so sorry. You were spoken to like you were a schoolgirl." And I was like, "Yes, I was." And they're like, and I was thinking, "Why didn't you say anything then? Why are you calling me now?" And then when I asked them, "Well, what do you think I should do? How do you think I should respond?" And they're like, "Well, you might just need to pacify their ego." And I was like, just took over as a CEO of a women's rights organization, and the advice I was getting internal to this movement was to, again, make myself small, to comfort, a different director. And that was when I also realized to change the system, you need to build your team. And you need to find the team who's going to question you, but question you with kindness and compassion and still respect you. And again, wants to lead and do things differently. And so I'm super excited that Shireen, you're one of those people who joined us, particularly because you also wanted to create something really different in this world.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. I think that's another experience that I can relate to as an ex-CEO, but also as a board member. And sometimes those dynamics are fairly complex. What I often say to my clients, my coaching clients as leaders is, the way someone responds has nothing to do with you. So it's their issue, right? But you have control over the way you respond to what they do or say. And in a way, you also have the power in that moment to transform that situation. And for me, that's so important for women's agency, in not owning other people's behavior, but owning your own behavior and thinking about how you can use your behavior, your agency, your voice to address the situation. So thanks for sharing that. So what do you think that means, though, for what we are talking about in feminist movements and organizations around intergenerational leadership, and thinking and seeing the work that you do and the work that we do as leaders in different ways rather than the ways that we've always done? How are you dealing with that as WRA, and what are you seeing is important in that regard?
Yeah, it's one thing I would say. I think the last 2 years in the COVID pandemic has completely changed my thinking in terms of what a healthy workplace and culture looks like. And we are really doing things incredibly different at WRA since then. I really believe a happy workforce is a more productive workforce, and also recognizing that people need different things to be happy, and there's different ways to go about work. We are really focused on outcomes and how you get to that outcome. I'm less concerned you following my path or any type of prescribed path. What you need to do to be successful and to reach that shared vision and shared outcome, it's about, as a leader and as a feminist organization, we need to create the environment that allow you to thrive. We've moved into things again, moved away from this idea like you have to be in the office to really have impact. Allowing people to truly set their own schedules, and recognizing when you're most productive, when you're not, and how do you manage that with your larger life. Those are things we're wanting to do. I probably used to be like pretty old school before the pandemic, where similarly I thought people needed to come into work. I judged people by the hours they put in, probably might have been more of a micromanager. And what we saw during the pandemic was all those things went away. Our outcomes didn't. In fact, we had higher outcomes than we ever did before by relaxing and bending the rules. And, having partners and colleagues and employees serve women and girls in the way they felt was best for women and girls, with women and girls, and for themselves. And again, the impact was only twofold, it was tenfold. It was incredible. And so knowing that, very careful to not want the rubber band to snap back. One thing I found a little bit in the intergenerational, I'm still a pretty young leader. I'm in my early 40s, and within the sexual reproductive health and rights space, that is fairly young. A lot of discussions I've noticed have, again, centered around the return to work and the office and needing that. And I think a lot of that is about responding from what works best for you, as opposed to answering the question about what works best for the team, and really listening. And if that's what they're asking for, again, figuring out a way to give it to them versus figuring out what you need to be your best leader. Figure out the type of leader they need to really thrive. It's that ask, listen, and act. And when you listen and ask people, you have to be prepared to do what they say. And that's not a lot of people are willing to do that. And I think, that is the big feminist piece. And, I have strong opinions and strong ideas, but what I think the team and really values is, so many people are saying they want to be heard. And I don't think actually our team says that, because what they can see is that leadership can be swayed. And can really be listening. But so I think there's a lot of verbiage, but a lot of people are listening without really intention to follow through. And so I think that's a really important feminist principle.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. We have a question from someone who's watching us on LinkedIn. It's Tambo, and she's asking, Kristy, can we still work objectively in what we know we can do without feeling emotional or personal? I know that it is so hard to do because we are still humans, but what are you doing so far that is working and could be an opportunity for leaders in the heat of growth?
Yeah. So I think I understand the question, but if not, feel free to clarify. I'm someone who thinks emotion is good. It's good to bring your emotion to work. Our emotion makes us better people, and to acknowledge how you're feeling, I think, is really important to understand the situation that's happening. One thing I grapple, though, is I try to identify the emotion I'm really having, and I'm like, is this a reflex of anger, of irritation, and trying to center that emotion, and then having an alternative thought. And this is actually something that I learned in mental health therapy for trying years of trying to reframe my thinking, of having grown up in a sort of an abusive situation, but to interpret how I'm seeing other people, but even myself. And so own that emotion, but stop yourself and ask, is this the right emotion to be having? And what could be the alternative thought? And doing that has been really powerful and really helpful, bringing that into my workspace. And again, everything is personal. When people say don't take things personally, you're talking to a person, and you have to remember that. And I think recognizing how things go down so you can be a kinder, more compassionate leader and responder, I think is important. I think the big thing is not letting yourself get mired in anger or mistakes, and really take stock of it, but making the choice to move on and trying to do better the next time, I think is really important. Too many of us, we get mired and stuck there, as opposed to learning and applying moving forward. I hope that answered the question. Yeah.
Yes, I think you did, and I agree. I was listening to a podcast on the Enneagram, which is an assessment, a personality tool recently that I use in my coaching. And one of the things they were saying is that it's good to feel the emotion. You must feel the emotion, but you must manage the response. So how you respond to that emotion is important, but it is also important that you feel that emotion, whether it's anger, resentment, whatever that may be. So I'm 100% with you on that. Feeling emotions, this idea of personal and professional, I think we can no longer, separate these things into little boxes. Kristy, so we live in a context now where issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion are really pertinent in our feminist environment, in our development sector environment, but across the world in different ways. And I was wanting to hear from you as a leader how you engage with this, and in particular, of course, as a white woman leader in a feminist environment, what your thoughts are and how you engage with that.
Yeah, this is a good question, a tough question, one I think about every day, as do the different people I work with, to push ourselves to be better, and more effective and more inclusive. We have done some radical transformation in the last year or so, moving from a board that was 100% white, and older, to be more diverse. A team that was once completely based in Washington, D.C., to now that one is globally dispersed and diverse, moving away of these distinctions between global South and global North, and really trying to be a global network of global solidarity, but that is driven by local and proximate action. I think one thing we're trying to do is, there's so many committees, there's so many papers, there's so many group tanks, and sometimes I'm in these conversations and it feels like it still is about just trying to defend or justify your own reason for existence. We're trying to do quickly. I think gradual change only leads to gradual impact. And so we are moving fast and rapid to again respond to what women and girls are asking and be the model of what we're calling for. I question my leadership daily. Again, I have personal experience with a lot of the issues we deal with, but also how they affected me is very different than how they've affected other women. I know my skin color, my education, a variety of things made it easier for me to step out of some of the patriarchal things that held me back. And so wanting to bring all these voices together. One thing as a leader, I think I'm a good leader, but we ask too much of our leaders. And so one thing I really also want to promote and advance is the idea of collective leadership. A global movement should not be led by one person. And that's something we're really seeking to explore and advance. How do we bring a collection of leaders together who are representative and bold and are can collectively fill a CEO function? And I think one thing we're really, and so we're working on that right now. And one thing I would also say, it's not just about diversity. It's not having diverse people upholding the same paradigms. We're really trying to challenge the paradigms, and we want people who are willing to do that. At different times, I have stepped out of roles to be replaced by someone who looks exactly like me, and sometimes not as willing to push the envelope. And so my desire of getting this position of power is to ensure that I'm spreading it well I can. And I know so many incredible women. I need to scoot over at the table so they have room too. And WRA is going to show together how we do that, how we do really collective leadership in that way. So, so we have women leaders already. Now we need the board to approve their titles and approve this kind of this more integrated structure of collective leadership.
Yeah. Sure, thanks for that. And before our electricity cuts out, let me ask you the last question, which is, you spoke about it a bit earlier, but it's one of the things I see as a consistent challenge for women leaders. and that is taking care of self. So share with us how you take care of yourself and also how you support your team to do the same.
Yeah. It's something historically I have not been as good at. And I, took a point of pride in, I work so hard and, I don't want my team to suffer, so I'll take that on. And then I was reading, it's behind me, a really incredible book by a disability advocate. It's called Sitting Pretty, The View from My Ordinary Resilient Disabled Body. And in it, there's an essay talking about where this question was asked of a lot of feminist leaders, and they all laughed and said, "Oh, I'm a bad example." And to her, she was like, "That's not good enough." Because what about many of us who can't actually do that? That is not creating an inclusive environment. And think from the position of someone who can't and shouldn't do that physically. But then when you think that way, it's better for all of us. Mm-hmm. When I take a moment to stop and care for myself, it encourages the team to do it, and they're happier, and I'm really happier. It's something we have to remind ourselves to do all the time. Something good at, but I'm always working to strive and be good at. But I think also we have to think about collective care. Self-care in some ways is another way we just make ourselves feel like we're failing, because all these other things, and then I didn't do the prioritization of myself either. So the team is really about how can we care for each other as we do this work, and how can we step in for each other, so when you need to put yourself first, you can do it. And so really looking at those collective care strategies is something I think is incredible and important, and having people who hold you accountable to it. And again, stop thinking of it as a good thing and that you're so badass and strong for being a workaholic. You're not contributing actually to the good of society by doing that. But that's a mind shift. That's a mind shift that takes a while to do that. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. And I think one of the things that I love from what's happening in feminist movements is this idea of collective care. And how it goes beyond the kind of typical things we often think about, but also around solidarity and, as you say, how we can take care of each other, but also how we treat each other, of course. So thanks for sharing that. Okay, my final question, Kristy, is if you have to share one piece of advice with your younger self, bearing in mind that, you may want to pursue leadership, what would you tell her?
Speak out. Someone else is thinking the same thing you are, and they will be so grateful you said it, and you might find a friend, an ally, a mentor, a partner. I was really, and I would also say, trust your instincts. I think where I found when I've been the most successful in my career is when I stopped operating out of a place of fear and followed my gut and, followed my instincts. When I stopped guessing what people wanted from me and worried about what people wanted from me, and thought about, okay, what do I think is, the right thing to do here, and was my authentic self. That's when I found I had better outcomes, when I stayed true to my principles and vision. Doesn't mean you can't learn from others, you're not open to others, but still don't be afraid to have the courage of your convictions. Others will share them. Find your community, create your community, and you'll get to the top together. Yeah.
Thanks. And it's also, of course, a process of you learning and growing from that, right? So I totally agree with that. Before we close, there's a comment from Mumtaz. She says she loves the notion of collective leadership and looks forward to seeing the progress and how it can be replicated in other industries as well. So, I think there's definitely people are buying into the idea of collective leadership. And I think, of course, we see what's happening in the world with, with men making decisions and, the way women's rights are still being affected negatively and so on. So we do believe, I think, that it's time for a different kind of leadership, and collective leadership is one of the ways of doing that. Thanks so much, Kristy, for joining us. I deeply appreciate you making the time. And I look forward to speaking to you next week. I think we've had some interesting comments, and so I think people have really enjoyed what you've had to say. I appreciate your honesty and your authenticity. And I hope you have a restful weekend.
Thank you. And thank you. It was really great to talk about these things. We don't talk about them enough. And I can't wait to listen to other women leaders that you're interviewing. I know there's so much I can learn from them. And so really appreciate the sisterhood of leadership at all levels.
Sure.
Yeah.
Thanks so much. And thank you everyone for joining us. We'll see you in 2 weeks' time. Have a good weekend. Bye.